absolutely don't have all the answers. I am still learning. I think if you're in a role, no matter how senior or junior you are, and you can't honestly say that you're still learning, then you're not in the right position. Shouldn't we all be in positions where we're still learning?
Welcome to the Game of Her Own podcast, a podcast about women who work in sports. I'm your host, Jahaan Blake. After 15 years of working for 3 major league teams, including the Boston Red Sox, Los Angeles Dodgers, and the Chicago Cubs, I discovered the one thing I loved the most was helping women in sports shatter glass ceilings and take their seat at the table. I loved it so much that I made a business out of it. I have the honor of coaching high-performing women in the sports and entertainment industry and supporting them as they go after exactly what they want in their career. So if you are feeling tired of waiting on the sidelines, done being overlooked for promotions, and you're ready to pull ahead of the pack and take your career to the next level, girl, I'm here for it. I also created the Game of Her Own podcast to support you as well. We are here to share the stories of incredible women who work in sports and entertainment. These leaders and trailblazers will inspire you with their success and the lessons they've learned along the way to the top. Ladies, there is nothing like women empowering women. I am so honored you're here. I'm going to let you in on a little secret. I write the intro for the podcast after I record the interview. I like to go back and listen to the episode and pull out key takeaways so you can decide if this episode is right for you. Well, let me tell you, when I went back to listen to this episode, I got excited all over again about my conversation with Jessica Berman, Deputy Commissioner and Executive Vice President of Business Affairs for the National Lacrosse League. Y'all, Jessica is no joke. She is whip smart, and you are going to love hearing from her. She is the highest ranking woman in a men's professional sports league. Come on, that is incredible. And I'm so honored that I got to spend some time with Jessica, and I'm so honored to share that with you. She drops some great advice for women in sports at all levels. You know I like to pack a lot into one episode, but some highlights of our conversation. Jessica shares why she doesn't suffer from mom guilt, why you should focus on your potential instead of your performance when it comes to new opportunities, why you should always be stretching in your career, and why you should go after the less sexy jobs. And you know there is so much more in there. If you are listening to this episode on the day it comes out, may I wish you a happy National Girls and Women in Sports Day. What better way to celebrate the holiday than with a bonus episode with the highest ranking woman in a men's professional sports league. All right, ladies, let's do this. Jessica, welcome to the Game of Her Own podcast. I am so happy you're here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Of course. Okay, so I can't wait to dig in because you have the coolest title. I won't curse. I'll just say the coolest title ever. But before we get there and dig into what you do now, can you take us back in time and tell us when you fell in love with sports?
Sure. I fell in love with sports. I actually remember the moment, which I'm not sure many people can say. I was 16 and I was attending a New York Islander game. And helpful context for that is that I grew up in Brooklyn, which is really a melting pot. And throughout my childhood, I was always fascinated with diversity and inclusion, even before it was a thing, and was fascinated by the things that brought society together. And so I sort of paid attention to those things throughout my life and always was interested in being part of solutions or moments that united communities. And so I was at this New York Islanders game during this period of time where I was attending a public high school in Brooklyn, and it was one of the first high schools to have metal detectors introduced. And I was just always fascinated by and wanted to play a role in using any influence or privilege that I have in my life to be able to support education around inclusion and people who come from either marginalized or underrepresented groups. And so I was at this Islanders game, and I happened to be sitting next to these 2 people who were from very different backgrounds, and the Islanders scored a goal, and these 2 people embraced in joy in that moment. And I was so mesmerized by the moment that I asked them whether they knew each other or were they season ticket holders that happened to sit next to each other for every game. And they were complete strangers, had never met before. And they were just so united by their love of the game that any differences in their life melted in that moment. And I was like, I need to work in sports so I can be part of something in society that brings people together. And I didn't really know what that meant. Of course, like CSR wasn't really a thing in the 90s. This was like 1993, but I just wanted in some way, shape, or form to be part of that moment.
Okay. At 16, that is incredible, right? Having all those thoughts, thinking about diversity and inclusion and everything you just said, to have those thoughts and those feelings at 16 and know you want to work in sports is just incredible. Like, I remember what I was doing at 16 and it wasn't that. That's incredible.
I feel really fortunate that I had that epiphany. Plenty of sort of challenges in my life and my career and personally, but I always knew what I wanted to do. And for that reason, I feel very fortunate.
Where do you think that came from?
You know, I was always fascinated by, and ultimately became a lawyer, but I was always sort of puzzled, I should say, by injustice. And it was something that I sought to find solutions for, explanations for, tried to understand. And you know, I think there are lots of ways to come at those challenges in society. And I always felt like breaking down barriers is the best way to open people up to different perspectives. And in those moments when you're in a sports environment, I think you can boil down to your most raw emotions of just finding commonalities and parallels. And I've always felt that if we could do more of that, we could start from a place of connectivity and from there learn about each other's differences and be open to how those differences might make each other better. But you have to start from a positive place, a less defensive place. And I think that's sort of the vision that I had, probably not that well thought out when I was 16, but certainly has evolved into that.
Yeah, that is fantastic. Tell everybody now what you do and who you do it for.
I'm the Deputy Commissioner of the National Lacrosse League. We are an indoor professional lacrosse league that essentially plays within the playing environment of a hockey rink, which is ironic because I spent 13 years at the NHL. And we have 14 teams across North America, 5 in Canada, the remainder in the US. And we are structured and modeled like professional sports leagues that most of your listeners are probably familiar with, like the NBA or the NHL or the NFL. And my role is essentially anything and everything that a league does day to day, as well as building our growth strategy for the future in terms of its revenue and relevance.
Okay, so how does 16-year-old Jessica figure out what she wants to do? She knows, and then goes from that to being the deputy commissioner. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but you are the highest ranking female in North America, if I got that right.
I think for men's professional sports.
For men's professional sports. Yes, I should put that in there. Yes, I mean, that's incredible. So how do you go from that, and what did you set out to do? Like, take us back when you were like in college and you decided you want to work in sports. What did you set out to do?
Well, I think first and foremost, I was raised to believe that if I worked hard and put forth my best effort, I could go toe to toe with anyone, and to really put my work ethic first and not give anyone any reason to not consider me an asset to whatever job or opportunity or project. And, my parents just sort of instilled that sort of confidence in me from really the time I was little, that I could really do anything I wanted to do. I wasn't the best student. I often talk about that with my kids. I think in today's world, I'm not sure my path would have ended in this, or I shouldn't say ended because I'm only 43. I hope it's not over. I'm not sure my path would have led to this place, because I was an okay student, but I wasn't like top of my class, valedictorian. In today's world, I look at the next generation and I'm like, wow, it is so competitive and so much harder than it was, I think, when I was younger. It was, I don't want to say easy to stand out, but it definitely wasn't, the expectations weren't the way they are today. So I just put that as a caveat for anyone who's listening. I feel the pain of the next generation looking at my kids and the kind of pressure they're facing at super young ages. I mean, my 12-year-old talks about like building his resume for college. And I'm like, oh, well, if I did this activity, would that look good? These are the kinds of things kids talk about these days. And it's frightening. To your point, to think about what I was doing at age 12, it wasn't like thinking about positioning myself for college. So, I guess I always distinguish myself with my work ethic. And I still think that's an important fundamental today. I always, in any opportunity I have had in my life, whether it was an intern or even today, do anything and everything I can do to make the work product better, to support my peers, to show up, and never ask of anyone something I wouldn't do myself. Mm-hmm. And I think those fundamental values really have helped me. My dad is 83 and he still works a lot. So I come from, and my mom, I should say, is 74 and she still works full time. So I come from a family of workers, and I come from a family of people who, in a lot of ways, believe that you have to love your work and that work should be something you enjoy. It should be something that adds value, that makes you feel fulfilled. And I never view it as a chore, as something that I don't want to do. I don't complain about it. I don't begrudge the amount of work I have. I feel lucky that I have the amount of work I have, that there's anyone relying on me is a privilege, especially in today's environment, today's economy. So, that's always been my perspective on work. I've never viewed it as something that I had to, put in my time so that I could go and play. All of it is part of the balance, and I enjoy all of it for different reasons.
Do you feel like like you're in your job, you don't feel like you're not necessarily this one right now, but all of the jobs that you've had, you don't complain and you just kind of do it because you love it, and it's not because you have to, because you get to. Is it because you made the right choice of where you wanted to be? Were you following your passion in terms of, like, first you were a lawyer, I mean, you're still a lawyer, and then then you went into community relations when you were at the NHL. So is it more because you chose the path where you wanted to be and followed your passion?
Yeah, I do think that enjoying and loving what you do makes it feel more fun. And so I think marrying your passion, your interests with your profession is a great strategy to feeling more fulfilled by your career. I was fortunate enough to do that. And I will say a lot of people want to work in sports and there's not that many jobs. So important to note that as I've thought about my career, and there were various times where I thought I may not end up in sports or I might sidestep into another career, there are so many interests that I have that extend beyond sports. Yes, I knew at 16 that this is what I probably wanted to do, but just as an example, when I was in law school, this will seem so random given how methodical my path was, but sort of to illustrate the multidimensionality of my interests, when I was in law school, I almost took a year after I had applied for one of two positions, and both became opportunities. I didn't do either for various reasons, but one was to work at the International Criminal Tribunal of Rwanda as a law clerk in international human rights. And the other was to clerk at the Supreme Court in Israel as an advisory clerk on how the US Supreme Court would handle different legal issues. Neither one has anything to do with sports and anything to do with my very clear path that I traveled. And if I had taken one of those, who knows where my path would have led. And I think I probably would have felt equally fulfilled and happy. I mean, thinking about all of your interests and passions and pursuing them all, and all of those other interests that I have, I cultivate, even if it's not in my profession, but in my personal capacity. I read books and listen to podcasts about other areas of interest, even if they're not what I do for my work.
I'm having one of those moments where I'm like, oh, I just got lost in her words. I'm supposed to be interviewing and I'm just like, this is great. What's the next question? Oh, that's my job. Okay. So take us through. So now you worked at the NHL and you got promoted. You know, when I'm doing my research, I'm seeing that you're getting promoted a lot, and you went from legal to community relations. And give everybody a sneak peek on how you were advocating for yourself for all these different roles. And I mean, they're big jobs.
Yeah. The short answer is finding what I call the white space. Finding the opportunities that are a little bit off the radar and a little bit maybe less sexy, but give you an opportunity to stand out. And I can think of at least 3 or 4 big pivotal moments in my career where I did that. And it resulted in huge gains in my ability to ultimately be recognized and promoted and advance my career. I'll give you an example. When I was at Proskauer Rose early in my career, which is a law firm that represents a lot of the sports leagues, and I was in the labor and employment department, and I was first or second year associate, and the partners there represent the NBA and the NHL and Major League Baseball and the NFL and Major League Soccer, like all the major leagues. And if you think back to the year 2002, 2003, the leagues that were super, super, super relevant were definitely the NFL, definitely the NBA, definitely Major League Baseball, and everything else was, even the NHL, frankly, was not like the sexy thing that it is today. And all of the junior associates were going after the NBA work and the Major League Baseball work. And there were so many, mostly men, who were like wanting that work. And I decided I could either go toe to toe with these guys and get in the mud pit, basically, or I could take a step back and think about what other sports work is there? And is there an opportunity for me to stand out in another way, to go a little bit off the beaten path or a little bit more of a circuitous route? And most people wouldn't necessarily describe the NHL as a off the beaten path, but at that time, relative to the other work, it was. And no one was going after the NHL work, the junior associates who were interested in sports. And I put forward a specific strategy to build a relationship with the partner that represented the NHL, whose name is Bob Berman, who's still a mentor of mine. And he was not the same partner who was doing the NBA or the Major League Baseball work. And he and I started working on non-sports clients together. I built trust with him, and he learned to rely on me for a lot of the support that he needed. And then when it was time to do the NHL work stoppage, which was one of the seminal moments in sports labor history, the NHL had to shut down for a whole season to achieve its cost certainty model with the salary cap in 2004-05. I was positioned to be that person because I had sort of sidestepped away from the masses and positioned myself as the person he was going to lean on for this work. And I can think of a lot of other examples as well, but I would say that for me, that's been the key. Keeping that perspective and moving away from like checking your ego at the door a little bit.
Yep.
Not going after the thing that's going to be the sexiest or the most high profile, but the thing that's going to be fulfilling, the thing that's going to get you where you want to go.
Yeah. I was just going to ask that question, right? It has to align to what you want to do. So for me, when I first started working in sports, and I was with the Red Sox, and I was part-time Fenway ambassador, making like $5.25 an hour. I loved my job so much. And it was fine that I could barely make rent. Like I just didn't care. I was having time in my life. And then when it was time, I wanted to become full-time. And I'm in my early 20s. So it's like, okay, I got to get a full-time job. I wanted to stay within that department. It was fan services and it was taking care of fans. And it made me want to work long hours. It was something I never saw myself wanting to like work double headers. Like, like I was like, I don't want to work, 12-hour days. Who wants to do that? I did. I loved it. And so I was going after the less sexy job, and there was no position, right? So I had to like advocate for myself and ask them to create one. But it all made sense, and it helped me with my career. One, like you said, I was going after the less sexy job, right? And two, I got to do what I loved, and I made a whole entire career out of it. So I absolutely understand where you're coming from. I think that's great advice.
Absolutely. The same thing happened when I left the NHL. People were like, how could you leave the NHL? And I called it the shiny shield. Was it a head turner at, cocktail parties and people were like, oh, she works in the NHL? Definitely. But I had been there for 13 years. So at what point is my tenure either diminishing returns, or is it really continuing to advance my career? Am I getting the professional development opportunities that I feel like I need at this point in my life? The answer truly was maybe, but I'll keep my ears open if there is something that can infuse a more expedited experience. And this was that. And it is the less sexy alternative, but it's fun. And I'm learning, and it's a challenger property, and we're innovative and risk tolerant, so that we're not saying, well, we've never done it this way, so why are we doing it? So I'm getting to exercise my creativity, building business acumen, building a commercial business. It's fun.
Hey, it's Jahaan jumping in to share some exciting news for any of you who feel stuck, taken advantage of, and maybe even a little bit defeated moving your career forward. I'm putting together a small group of women who are ready to take their career to the next level with group coaching and accountability. After 18 years of working in the sports and entertainment industry, I know that it can be frustrating and emotionally draining as you try to take your career to the next level. And what makes you feel even more stuck? So many organizations don't give us the tools that we need to advance ourselves within an organization. I'm talking about skills like advocating for yourself, building your brand, navigating internal politics, and using your voice, all while being your authentic self. If you run into situations where you're feeling dismissed, sidelined, or passed over for opportunities, I want you to join us. Our group starts on February 23rd. Go to jahaanblake.com to learn more. I'm on a mission to make sure other women in the sports industry do not have to go at it alone. If you are ready to build a strong personal and executive brand, advocate for yourself without feeling like you're bragging, boldly use your voice to influence others, and be a change agent as you speak truth to power, let's chat and see if my group coaching program is the right fit for you. Head on over to jahaanblake.com to learn more. Or you can email me or text me, or simply set up a 15-minute interest call to chat. I can't wait to hear from you. Okay, let's get back to the interview. You know what I like about what you're saying is that you're still learning. You're a commissioner. You're still learning and growing. And I don't want to say this in a disrespectful way, but like, you don't have it all. You're just like all of us. We're all still growing together.
Are you kidding? I mean, I thought you were going to say you don't have all the answers. I absolutely don't have all the answers. I am still learning. I think if you're in a role, no matter how senior or junior you are, and you can't honestly say that you're still learning, then you're not in the right position. Shouldn't we all be in positions where we're still learning? There was that book, I think it was written by Jack Welch. I'm pretty sure it was him, where he said you should, when you look at your job responsibilities, you should be, I don't know if it was like 80-20 or 70-30, but some meaningful percent of your job responsibilities should be new, because otherwise it's like complacency. You're just like a robot. You're doing the same thing you've done every single year, and you sort of lose your mojo. I love that balance. I love getting some confidence doing the things that I've done before. Mm-hmm. That's really important. It feels really good to practice what you do well. And then in those moments where I'm stretching, I'm like, this is good. This is pushing me beyond my comfort zone. And in whatever I do for the rest of my life, this is now going to ultimately one day move into the category of like, I'm comfortable doing this, but you got to practice it to get comfortable.
Yes, I say this all the time. You have to practice. It gets easier every time. My first podcast, I never recorded a podcast, came up with this idea, I'm going to do it. My first one, I was so nervous, and I was interviewing my client. Like, I just couldn't. I was like, oh my God, I'm so nervous. I can't believe this. And I talk to this woman all the time. Like, she is a client of mine. I picked 3 people strategically that I knew very well to help ease my way into it. But I loved that feeling of stretching, especially during COVID. I needed something, right? Like, I can't just sit here and wait. And that was in March, and I thought I'd be waiting for a couple of weeks. And here we are in December and still waiting for sports. Yeah. All of us were listening like, yeah, we're all waiting, Jahaan. But yes.
Yeah, well, especially in March when I've gone back and read sort of internal memos. We all thought this was going to be such a shorter stint than it's become.
Yes, we sure did. But thinking about that stretching, and I love that advice. I find that, a lot of people, a lot of women that I work with at least will get stuck, or women that I talk to get just stuck on that stretching part. They think they have to be perfect, know it all, buttoned up, right? Have it all together, and then they can do it. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, or your advice to women who are kind of stuck in that category.
Well, I think, and I'm always hesitant to generalize or stereotype, but I'm going to go and do that now. I think if you read books about gender equity and the things that both make women a great asset in the workplace, but also hold us back, I think it's part of that, that sort of perfectionist approach and the feeling that you need to have performed the task in order to know that you can do it is not something that most men think about. They think about, again, this is well documented in research, and it's not every man, it's not every woman, so I'll qualify it with that. But most men think about potential. And if you're limiting yourself by your performance as opposed to your potential, you've self-selected out of so many opportunities. And I think ultimately it comes down to just fear of failure, feeling like there's not a huge margin for error. Some of those perceptions are probably true, unfortunately, but a lot of it, I think, is sort of acting as if, and then, the fake it till you make it. To your point of, yes, I'm the deputy commissioner. When I've talked to some college students or high school students or even people in the industry, they're like, I can't believe that you admit to your vulnerabilities. I'm like, I just don't think it's honest to not do that. And again, anyone who's not admitting to that, man or a woman, is just not being honest. So we have to give ourselves permission as women to show up as our authentic selves, to ask questions. And it happens to me still in meetings. I was actually just in a meeting today at my 12 o'clock senior staff meeting. And I was actually, it was the commissioner, obviously, is my boss, but even among the senior staff, some of whom report to me, some of whom report to him, but I was afraid to ask the question, thinking that it might be a dumb question. And I had to talk myself into it. And it turned out that it was a great question. It was a question that was on everyone's mind. So it still happens. It happens to everyone. It happens to me, even on my own team. But I don't think it's a bad thing to have that checkpoint or that filter to say, like, should this be asked? Is this appropriate? Is there a way for me to get this information another way? And then ultimately sort of face down what that voice in your head is. Is that lack of confidence? Is that legit lack of information, like a valid question? Is that an insecurity rearing its ugly head? Like, what is that about? Like, unpack that quickly and then either put it back in the box or unleash it. And I think just acknowledging all of that is super important, and putting yourself out there so that you at least have the chance that others have.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And that inner critic, inner mean girl, whatever you want to call it, everybody has it. And if they say they don't, I believe that they're lying. Like, everybody has it. And I think that people who manage it well are people who just acknowledge it, like you said, right? Are vulnerable, but unpack it, but don't stay there. Don't move in. You have to believe in yourself, right? And I loved those filters that you said, like, just, okay, is this information I could have got somewhere else? Is this, just kind of checking through real quick. Okay, this is a legit question. And then just believing in yourself, even if nobody else wanted to know the answer to that question. That's okay. You needed to know, and it's a good question. Just put it out there, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So talk us through, you've had an incredible career, and obviously it is not over yet, but talk to us about something that, maybe share with us something that you've struggled along the way in your journey to becoming, deputy commissioner, where you are now.
Yeah, struggles. I've had my share of them. I would say one is, I don't want to overuse the work-life balance thing, but, if I'm being completely honest, I try to have a real-time check on how I'm allocating my time between my family, myself. I'm gonna put those in separate categories, because being in my family environment, I'm still giving a lot. It's not like time for me to recharge necessarily. I have 2 young kids and work. And I do have this, which is probably a conversation for my psychologist and not for you, but I do have sort of inner relentless drive to succeed in my career, which I don't even really know where or why that needs to be as intense as it is, especially at this point in my life. But it is there. I have to acknowledge reality. And so without keeping it in check, the tail could definitely wag the dog. I could definitely find myself working way too much, way more than I should be. So I think one of the struggles for me is just making sure I'm in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing based on where I should be, a needs assessment of who needs me most. And sometimes who needs me most is me. Sometimes I need me. Sometimes I need to take a run or hop on the Peloton or, go get a massage or whatever it is, how you refill your well, whatever your guilty pleasures are. And that is definitely an ongoing, I don't want to say struggle, but something that I wrestle with always. That's just always there for me. And I've sort of brought my children into that challenge, that predicament, and we talk about it all the time. And they sort of understand that, they have a voice in this too. And if they need more than I'm offering to them, I'm a single mom, I should say. So if I'm missing something in terms of what they need from me, whether it's attention or time or anything else, they have agency to raise that. We sort of live in a environment here in my house where I want them to understand that work is super important to me, that I want to be successful, but it would never be at their expense. So we sort of have check-ins about that often. Interestingly, I call them he for she's. I have 2 boys. They're actually like in the other, and maybe it's reverse psychology unintentionally, where I've sort of created, every time I'm like, is this okay? I'm going to work, pre-COVID, like a work trip or this or that. And they're like, Mom, we want you to do everything that you're capable of. Like, you go, girl. Like, they're just so.
Oh my goodness.
And when I took this job, when I was debating whether to take this job, we had a family meeting with my boys. And I said, this is going to be a huge amount of responsibility and it's going to take a lot more time. And we need to all be on board with this, because I can't have like backseat driver, like, I can't believe you did this to us. I can't do this well if I have that. And my 12-year-old, who was 11 at the time, said, you have to take this job. You're a pioneer.
Oh,
and
my goodness.
Okay, I'll do it. Fine, I'll do it. So yeah, I would say that's probably the biggest struggle. And part of that is, being a woman in a male dominated industry where I probably do have some subconscious tendencies to want to overperform, maybe unnecessarily, but those are all there for sure.
I have the chills from what your sons are saying too. That is incredible. I feel like you should record those moments or write them down and never forget them. That's amazing. So I hear you're saying you're being open with your children, having dialogue, having check-ins, and bringing them along for the ride. They are a part of this. When they look back when they're older, they're going to be able to say, I had a part in my mom's success.
Absolutely. They know way more about sports business probably than any 10 and 12-year-old do in the entire world.
Watch out.
They're always like, is this confidential or can I talk to my friends about this? They're always like, whether it's appropriate to share. Those are lawyers' kids probably, but no, they are absolutely along for the ride. And it's how I've been able to do what I've done, because I do not have any of that mom guilt ever. I know that I'm doing this in part for them. Their perspective on women, because of what they've been a part of with my journey, is amazing. I can't wait to meet the women in their life, whomever they are, friends, colleagues, others, and see how they show up for them.
Yeah, that's incredible. I just had this weird thought. I was like, I want to know too. 12 years from now, I'm going to call you. So how are they doing? Really like a check-in episode. Wow, that's incredible. And and no mom guilt. So I'm not a mother and I can't relate, but I tend to understand where people are coming from. But I think you're the first guest that I've had that says that they don't have any mom guilt. It's like you cracked the code. I'm not going to lie.
Well, the way to eliminate guilt and shame, I'd say guilt and shame sort of come together, is transparency, right? Like, because then you're not you haven't made the decision for anybody else. And so my strategy on bringing them along for the ride has been to share in that responsibility. Like, we're jointly accountable for this. And to the extent they've ever tried to, I don't want to say shame me, but of course they're kids and they're like, you weren't at my pickup and everyone else's moms were there. And I was like, well, remember we talked about this. This was part of the decision for me taking this job. Now, if it's important to you for me to be there, let's look at the calendar and like next Tuesday I can pick you up from school. And it's like, okay, great. But like, we have joint accountability for the decisions we've made as a family. And the only way to do that is to give them agency and a voice in the decision-making process. So I feel like the path to a life without guilt and shame is transparency and true inclusion, right? Like we make decisions by committee here, and then we're all accountable for it.
Give us some more wisdom. So you just talked about, you mentioned working in a male-dominated industry. Talk a little bit about what your experience has been like. And I know you're ambitious and you want to have a successful career. And by everyone's definition who's listening, you are having one. But what has been your experience in working in a male-dominated industry? And what advice would you give to women, regardless of level?
Good question. I would say, and this isn't unique to men in relation to giving women opportunities, but I think generally in life, people want to feel valued and like they have value. And so I feel like when I look back on my career and even today, to the extent I've had success in engaging men as sponsors or mentors in my life, in part it's humility and being open and seeking to learn. I think when people feel that you're relying on them, they show up for you. And I think a lot of the missteps I've seen from a lot of women is, sometimes creating a perception that a little bit of lacking humility or not giving men a chance to show up for you, like letting them know you need their help. It's okay. It's okay, like to say that you need their help. The fact is they do control our industry. If you don't acknowledge that, then you're not acknowledging reality. So I think that's part of it. I think it also goes back to the white space. Like I don't want to pretend that I haven't encountered challenges in the male-dominated industry, but yes, you can sort of work to unpack a situation that might be dysfunctional or a relationship that's not working for you. And I don't want to suggest when you encounter those challenges that you just like about face, but there needs to be a point where you decide, this is diminishing returns. I'm not going to get what I'm looking for. I'm not going to be able to change this person. And so it's time to figure out a new strategy, even if it's a roundabout or a circuitous route. Don't get so caught up in trying to change people that you sort of win the battle and lose the war. We want to win the war, even if you have to lose some battles along the way. Mm-hmm. Okay, if you acknowledge that a couple of times or however many situations didn't work. I couldn't get through to this person. He or even she didn't respect me or didn't give me the acknowledgement that I think I deserve. And I tried X, Y, and Z and it didn't work. And okay, you don't know what you don't know. You don't know that person's background. You don't know what's created their impression. You don't know what actions you've taken that may have prompted that sort of response. And you could try to unpack that. But if it doesn't work, again, I go back to the white space, shift your attention to something that would be more constructive or productive, because, just continuing that toxic cycle of trying to beat down a brick wall, it's not going to end well for you. You're just going to feel frustrated, disenfranchised, demoralized. And, I've seen that play out with friends of mine, not necessarily only in sports, but just generally super smart women who have fell into that trap. And then sadly, many of them end up just leaving the workforce. And it's not to say that there's anything wrong with leaving the workforce, but if you do it, it should be because you want to, not because you feel like you were pushed out or because you didn't get what you want. Again, it's that same, like, check your ego. Okay, if you were not successful at something, it may be partly your responsibility, it may not, but at some point, just put your efforts towards something that is productive or has the possibility of being productive.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, and the advice you're giving really can be used with internal politics, like just dealing with anybody, right? Man or woman, like these same, I think, rules apply. And it's so easy to get caught up in that, trying to change somebody, trying to, it feels like you're going to win, and it's not. Like, I made that mistake, and it sucks all of your energy.
I know we're audio only, but on my wall, I collect sayings. I have sayings, all inspiring quotes all over my walls, but one of them that I keep front and center because of this exact reason, because I've fallen into that trap too, and it's really, really destructive.
Yes.
It can completely derail you, and sometimes when you're in it, you just can't see out of it. You don't understand what you're doing to contribute to it, and it's the serenity prayer. I always come back to that, which is essentially knowing what you can control, knowing what you can't control, and the wisdom to know the difference, Identifying the point at which you're trying to change something that you can't control. It's time to tap out and just say, this is not my battle to fight. And I just need to let this person be, just walk away.
Yeah. And I love that you have quotes everywhere. And as soon as I decorate, God, I've been here for almost 2 years and I don't know why I still haven't decorated, but I'm a quote person. I have them on Post-its everywhere. But what else has helped you? Like, when you're in those moments and you realize, and you don't realize maybe it's destructive, is someone else helping you see the sort of the light?
Off and on, but mostly on, have been a religious journal writer. And it's the practice of writing 5 minutes a day in a journal is so insanely helpful. And I'll tell you the point that it becomes, the enlightening moment is really when you go back and read a year ago or 2 years ago, because that's when you realize you're in a toxic cycle. And that's happened to me so many times, where I'll just flip back 6 months ago or a year ago and realize that I was literally writing the same thing that I could have been writing 2 years ago. That means I'm like literally in purgatory. I've literally, nothing has changed. Like, it's time to figure out what dynamics I'm contributing to that is feeding this toxic cycle. And you don't really realize it until you are able to take a step back and have perspective. And I don't know about you, but I don't even remember, like, a month ago, like, to have it in writing memorialized. You can't just, you wrote it. It's dated.
Can't argue that.
It's happened to me so many times where I'm like, I'm literally struggling with the same exact person and thing 18 months later. I think it might be time to acknowledge that this is something that I'm not going to change.
Yeah.
So that's the journal writing for sure. My mom's a psychologist, so I'm very open about the fact that I've been in therapy since I was a teenager. So, for me, it's not necessarily about like a particular issue. It's more just part of my wellness strategy in life, is to have someone unbiased and objective, and whose judgment I trust, who can be a sounding board. And if you find someone like that, if you're lucky enough to find someone like that who can serve that role for you, you can very easily have that person be your sort of whistleblower. I've had my psychologist be like, you realize you're doing it again, right? You do realize that. And it's like, what are you talking about? Well, remember 4 years ago when, because they just have like your highlight. They're your highlight reel. And so they can see patterns that sometimes you can't see. And even if it's not a psychologist, even if it's like a close friend or a family member or a mentor or someone, just being open to that is important.
Yeah. My favorite thing about therapy is when in my head, I am fired up about something and upset and, something to do with work. 'Cause literally that's why I got a therapist, because of work, like just performance anxiety. I was like, oh my God, I'm driving myself insane. So I got a therapist and it was so helpful. And the biggest aha moment was sometimes I say things out loud and the second they come out of my mouth and I'm like, wait, do I really think that? I can't believe I just said this to another human. Just getting it out of your mouth and just talking and hearing someone be like, the non-judgmental, but you know what I mean? Just putting a little bit of perspective around it is so helpful. Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay. Are you ready to end with a little fun?
Yes. I love fun. Especially, I have very low standards for fun these days since I haven't left my house in 9 months. So anything fun.
Well, good. I'm glad you have low standards, because as I said that, I was like, I might have built that up a little bit. All right. We're going to do some rapid fire questions.
Okay.
All right. First thing that comes to your mind, just say it. First one. What is your favorite sports moment?
First time I took my kids to a Michigan football game.
Oh, love that. Okay. What is something people always get wrong about you?
Wow. I don't know if they always get it wrong. But what comes to mind is mistaking my standards for myself as standards for them.
Ooh, that's a good one. Okay. I want to dive into it, but these are supposed to be rapid fire. Okay. What is one food you wouldn't give up?
Ice cream.
Yeah. Are you a morning person or a night person?
Definitely a morning person.
Me too. Favorite holiday?
Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish holiday. It's a new beginning.
Okay. What job would you be absolutely horrible at? I know this is a hard question for you.
Anything, this is you said the first thing that comes to mind. I just helped my 10-year-old with his homework this morning with his math homework, and I really struggled to understand remainders, as embarrassing as that is. So anything sort of engineering or math related, not my thing. He was worried at how much I was struggling. Okay, you just call a doctor. I'm like, it hurts my brain. Really, I can't figure out. Challenge.
I'm glad. You know what? If I had children, I'd have that same problem. I'd be like, math, maybe.
So I don't really. That's embarrassing, but true.
Okay. What product would you seriously stockpile if you found out they weren't going to sell it anymore?
Mizuno Wave Runner sneakers, because it's the only sneaker that I can run in, and I'm a runner.
Okay. What's your favorite app?
The Aura app. I'm obsessed with sleep, and I'm obsessed with tracking my sleep.
Totally checking that one out. Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram?
Facebook, I guess.
Okay. And who is your biggest inspiration in life?
My mom.
As a child, what did you wish to become when you grew up?
Some version of this, crazily.
I love that. I just got the chills. Okay, last one. Finish this sentence. The future of women working in sports is?
Bright.
Yes, it is. All right, Jessica, this has been absolutely fantastic. So much fun. I got the chills so many times. If people wanted to get in touch with you, how could they do that?
Well, I am on Twitter at Jessica Berman 1, I believe. And I do respond to DMs there. Or on LinkedIn.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me.
So what did you think of this episode? Do you know another woman who works or is aspiring to work in sports? Would you do me a favor and share this with them? It would mean so much if together we could support and inspire other women on their journey. And let's stay connected. I love meeting and talking to new people. Follow me on Instagram at Jahaan Blake and join the free Game of Her Own community by visiting jahaanblake.com. I can't wait to meet you.